Well, hello there, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar brought to you by Citrix ShareFile. Sarah, very first person to log on in with us today. Appreciate that. Desiree, right after her. Gus and Kevin out there. I have Pavarotti on the line. Danny out there, and Mario and Jamie and a whole cast of others. So welcome to all of you. James Hilliard here. Happy to be the moderator for this event and happy to have Patty Azzarello on board. She is a recovering high-tech executive. She's a best-selling author. I'm going to share a little bit more about Patty in just a moment. She joins us from Florence, Italy today. Glad to have her on board and sharing time with all of us here. And we are, Patty, focusing on success with virtual and remote teams. I've been working remotely for years and years and years. You're working remotely right now. When you think about all the remote teams that you've either talked to, that you've guided, that you've been a part of, is there one or two of those that kind of comes to mind and saying, hey, that's kind of really, that's what we should be striving for. That was a great successful remote team. Anything like that come to your mind?
You know, it's funny, that makes me think of this one guy that worked in my organization many years ago that really helped me formulate my whole philosophy on succeeding with remote and virtual teams, because he was the remote guy. It was a point in time when working remotely was not normal, and everyone was skeptical that this would work with him being so far away from everybody else. And he did what I'm going to talk about as being the fundamental factor as we get into this webinar, is he was able to exert his presence from afar. And a lot of times when you think of a remote employee, one of the problems is they disappear. This guy, he did not disappear. He was so much in everyone's face with a very strong presence that I thought, you know, that's how you do that. And a lot of the ideas that I'm going to be sharing with you were inspired by this one guy that had a personality you could not see, even though he was on the other side of the country.
Well, it's interesting just me hearing that little anecdote and thinking back to those early times when I was remote. There weren't a whole lot of tools that would help you be in everyone's face and be so present. So
right.
It'll be interesting to hear more about the tech and the tools, but also just the mentality and just how we as individuals, now managers, can work with those teams. So really been looking forward to this since it was put on my calendar, and by the looks of the audience, a lot of great turnout. So we got more folks coming on the line. Frank out there, Jaime, welcome to you. Connie just coming on board. We got Bernice, Patricia, and again, a whole host of others. So thank you all for taking part. What you can all do, folks, is you can be a part of the presentation. Patty's got things really broken down into kind of 4 sections today once we get started. So we're going to plan to, given time, pause after some of those sections. We'll take a handful of questions if we can at those points, and then we'll move on, give you a couple more tips and ideas, stop on down, clarify anything that we need to, and continue moving on. We'll answer questions at the end. If we don't get to 1 or 2 of those questions, we'll stack them up in a report. We'll see if we can get you some responses offline. I mentioned Patty is an author and a recovering high-tech exec that started with HP. At the age of 33, she was the youngest general manager at Hewlett-Packard. She was the chief marketing officer later on in life at Siebel Systems and the president and CEO of Euclid Software, a founder of the Azzarello Group. And what that group does now, what she does now, is works with CEOs and leaderships really to help businesses, and ultimately that's the people, get better at what they do. I mentioned best-selling author. The first book, Rise, and then Move was the latest. That's all about it, executing on strategy. So good reads for you. I'll share some contact information in the chat tab later for all of you to copy and paste so you can stay in touch with Patty on Twitter and other locales socially. But with that, Patty, again, final invite to the audience. Questions, comments, Timothy, Zach, Lawrence, get those in early and often. And with that, let me turn the floor over to you, and we'll bring in some questions and comments a bit later.
All right. Thanks, James. Hi, everyone. I am Patty Azzarello, and I, as James said, am currently in Florence, Italy. And I thought it was a great just coincidence that the timing of this webinar on this topic had me personally working remotely. So it seems to add a little bit of authenticity to our topic here. So what I would like to talk about today is the challenges of working in virtual and remote teams, both for individuals and for managers, and how to respond to those challenges in a very effective way. So for individuals, it's very much about how to exert your presence and your brand remotely and be known and seen. And for managers, how to effectively manage performance from afar. I get this question so often from managers. How do I effectively manage performance? How do I effectively engage and motivate people and teams when we're not all together? And how do we really improve the quality of remote collaboration and interactions? So I'm going to share my thoughts about this. For managers, they really want to know how to optimize performance across different sites, cultures, how to keep connected through time zone, cultural issues, just motivating people and teams who are far away, and how to get the benefit of the team. And this is a really important idea I want to share with you, is how to get the benefit of the team when the people are not actually together. And for individuals who are working remotely, there's this idea of just keeping in the loop. People like to feel in the loop. Think about how you feel when you feel like you're the last one to know something. And so the challenge of lacking necessary information, feeling left out, feeling ignored, and then just this idea of just because you're working remotely doesn't mean you don't want to enhance and develop your career. So how do you build that personal brand when no one sees you, right? How do you build a strong brand? How do you make sure your contributions are recognized? And how do you make sure that you are getting opportunities to lead even when you are working remotely? And then finally, just feeling like part of a team. So if you're working remotely as an individual, feeling isolated without the social reinforcement you get, and just sitting there kind of by yourself in your slippers, wondering, does my work matter? Does anyone see me here? And is my work being valued and appreciated? So before I jump into how to solve those problems, I just want to step back for a minute and talk about this question of what should your flexible work policy be? Most of you are business owners, and so many managers and business owners just ask me, Patty, what should it be? And I think we get too wrapped up in this question. And so we had a lot of discussion around this when Marissa Myers took over Yahoo and told everybody to come back to the office. And we have IBM doing the same thing now. And there is so much discussion about what's right or wrong or motivating or not motivating. And to me, the answer here is just so simple. The answer is that individuals can be much more productive working on their own, at home, remotely, from any location. Individuals can be super productive working alone, but teams cannot be more productive if people are working alone. And so what we as managers need to do is we need to optimize for both. So that means understand what things your team needs to collaborate on and make sure you have team time programmed to get that done, and then know the productivity you need from individuals, and then let them work wherever they want when they need to do their individual work. And if you can start to just think of your policy as optimizing to make both things happen, from the get-go, you just solve a lot of problems that people can't seem to stop debating. So optimize for both. Figure out what you want and optimize for both. So in this webinar, I'm going to use this checklist for succeeding with virtual and remote teams. And I'm going to use these 4 ideas in 4 different scenarios. So let me explain this checklist first. Number 1 is just about presence and thinking about presence with remote employees, or if you are the remote employee. The idea of presence is think about what you get when you can be physically present with people. That is a very strong way to communicate, interact, and collaborate when you have physical presence. So what I'm going to talk about in the model is how to exert presence even when you're not in the same room, and make sure you're always thinking of presence as one of the most important goals for success. Another thing about presence is if you can get that FaceTime up front, that's a beautiful thing, because then people understand they have experienced your presence physically, and anything you do to exert presence later on is more powerful. So presence is all about not thinking it's impossible because I'm not there. It's about changing your thought to say, even though I'm not there, I'm going to find ways to exert my presence. The next part of the model is about people. And I see a lot of managers treat the people who work in the same building like humans, like people, but then treat the people they can't see like resources. And I've heard managers just refer to their people who are not working in the same building as, oh, those are my resources in another location. Everybody, we are all people. And so we need to remember to always treat everybody like people and remember humanity no matter where they're working, and create triggers to remember to include the people who are not present. And remember, they are as fully part of the team as the people who are present. And I'm going to be talking about a model that I call motivation versus control. And that is when people work for you and directly report to you, a lot of managers will say, well, I have no problem executing programs and projects with those people because they report to me and I can tell them what to do. But when I have a matrix project and those people don't report to me, then I have trouble. We need to turn that upside down and think about how would you motivate people who don't work for you to want to do the work for you, and then why not use those same techniques with the people who do work for you instead of just ordering them around. And when we're talking about remote and virtual teams, this idea of humanity and motivation from afar is even more important. And so we need to really be thinking about motivating people to want to do the work and making that even stronger when they are remote. The fourth part of the strategies is communicating, and always having processes to communicate on purpose, to communicate better, to develop habits of sharing what you know, and just remembering that those people are out there and you need to share what you know, and then reinforce talking, conference calls, conversations with writing. And I'll be giving you some specific ideas about that. And then finally, performance management. When people are working remotely and performance suffers, it's almost never because people are slacking off. It's because the performance measures have not been made clear enough. If you make the performance measures super clear, it doesn't matter where the person is working. The problem is the clarity, not the fact that the person is working remotely. And so I'm going to show you how to use this checklist: presence, people, communicating, and performance management. That's the checklist in these 4 scenarios. When you are the remote employee, when you are managing a remote employee, 3rd, when you're managing a dispersed team, and 4th, when you're managing an intact outsourced team. In each of these scenarios, we want to think presence, people, communicating, and performance management. So the first one is when you are the remote employee, and as owners of businesses, many times I'm the owner of my business, I am the remote employee, and my clients are in other places in the world. So you can use these ideas if you are the one who personally needs to exert your presence. So the first thing is, if you can, offer to visit up front, or if you are managing an employee, have them come into the site where you are, where people are. Having that FaceTime first just makes everything easier along the way. It's not always possible, but if it is possible, it's a great thing to do. And then remember, it's up to you to exert your presence. And so this gets back to this guy that I talked about in the beginning, who so impressed me by his ability to exert his presence. The whole team was together except for him. He worked on the other side of the country. And every single time he had a meeting or participated in a conference call or a group meeting, every single time he sent a photo of himself. And in that email, it would be something like, here's the shirt I'm wearing today. I thought you'd like to know. I thought you'd like to see me. Or I'm working in this room today. Look at what's behind me on the wall. And this was before it was easy to snap a photo and send it. This was when you had a digital camera and you had to find a way to make it interface with your computer and find a way to process it and get it into an email. And he would do this multiple times a day, every single day of his life, to make sure that we all knew that he was there. And that was the thing that made me really understand the value and the possibility of exerting your presence even when you're not there. So just to sort of reinforce my point here, I'm going to turn my webcam on for a moment. And this is me. Hi, this is me right now. One example of me exerting my presence was showing you a picture of me in Italy, because I'm in Italy. But the more powerful thing is, this is me right now. Here I am exerting my presence. I'm going to turn the webcam off again because I think it might be a little bit distracting. But by giving you a feel for the fact that I'm here talking to you is an example of exerting presence. So don't hide. If anything, be extra engaged. Use video. Video is the next best thing to in-person, and it is so much better than phone or voice only. I have done business consulting with people around the world. There was one person in Dubai, another one in Singapore, another one in Israel. I've never met these people, but we always used video, and I now feel like we're friends, and our work collaboration was super productive. If you can use video, and don't resist. Don't give in to the thing that says, oh, I'm working at home, so I don't look good enough today, so I don't want to do video. Always choose video. Join conference calls early. If you're the remote employee, never be late, and greet everybody as they come on the phone. You are exerting your presence by saying hello to everyone. In terms of people, create extra connections with your colleagues. Don't make the only time you connect with colleagues when you're working on a particular work project. Schedule time for networking every week. Even if you're an introvert, especially if you are an introvert, schedule time for networking. And then here's a list of things that you can do to put positive energy and reinforcement into your network. It's not hard. Simply saying hello, offering a little positive feedback, saying thank you, following up, sharing a point of interest or enjoyment, using photos, using video mail, finding a way to just really be networking with people when you're not there has an enormous payoff in your career. So the last two parts of the model, communicating and performance. When you are the remote employee, make sure that you are really communicating your work outcomes and issues. Don't just do work, finish it, and send it in. Make sure you are clearly communicating with your boss, with your peers, about the value of the work outcomes that you've achieved, the issues you've resolved. Really be extra focused on communicating, sharing knowledge, helping, adding value in conversations. And then from a performance management standpoint, always remember whether or not you're remote, it's your responsibility to take weight away from your boss and other people. Anything you can do to make their life easier, where it feels like when you show up, their life gets easier because you've taken some weight away that you are going to resolve. This is going to be a good thing. Just because you're not physically present does not mean you can't be present. You just have to make these extra efforts to exert your presence from afar. So I'd just like to pause here and ask all of you if you've used techniques like these to exert your presence and stay connected, or if there's any questions on the line about this piece of being the remote person and how to handle that, I'm happy to take some thoughts.
Yeah, and Patty, let me jump in here right with Kelly out there. Kelly with an I, because I got two Kellys, but Kelly with an I saying, yeah, video, some exclamations there. Absolutely has used those. I'm getting others. Jeffrey saying absolutely use those. I started being a remote employee. I shared this with you, Patty. Yahoo Instant Messenger was the only collaboration tool available to me. So I would constantly, and sometimes I would screw up and take too long of a lunch, like 3-4 hours, because I'd forget to put status. But I would put, at the time I was doing a lot of audio and video editing X video. And I would put that there so my boss would see what project I was working on. Mm-hmm. And then I would say, talking to so-and-so on this project. So I use that as a status update in IM, knowing that she was constantly looking in there and trying to see what was going on. So much easier with today's tools to be able to not have to work in that manner, but I love that idea. I've got other people, Teresa, definitely they use videos. They do send fun pictures, as you had suggested, something that she's doing out there. Jenny, 15 years remotely working on things of using videos, likes to do that with vendors out there. Here's my Kelly with a why question for you, Patty. Can one, Kelly, be too present? And is there a way for Kelly and others to gauge whether or not they're kind of monopolizing some of these conversations or meetings or chats or whatever? Can we go too far?
You know, I would lean toward you almost can't go too far if you're the remote person. And I know nobody likes to feel like they're bragging or attention seeking or being political. But if you are concerned about that, I would just get some feedback. You know, I would poll a few people in that environment and say, you know, I put a lot of proactive effort into staying connected and to staying present with all of you. How do you think I'm doing? Do you think I'm hitting that at the right level? And I would just get some feedback and then use that feedback as appropriate. But I think sometimes it can feel like you're doing too much, yet it's not registering as much as you feel like you're doing. So I would definitely vote for getting the feedback.
All right, good stuff on that. Jenny works with 4 dogs. They're always asleep, always in funny positions, so she sends those around. So again, those are it sounds like a lot of the folks online here, Patty, it's the human aspect, right? They're really trying to remain that human because we talk about those funny things in the office and then we get down to work. So it seems like a lot of folks are using that type of thing to stay connected and stay present.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, the idea of showing funny things, showing human things. People love dogs, so you can't go wrong with dogs and cats on the internet and sharing fun photos that way. But yeah, that's the point that we're talking about here is exerting presence, and your most effective tool there is if you are exerting humanity and you are respecting and acknowledging the humanity of others in the way you exert your presence. That is the way to stay most connected and has the most value. So let me move on now to the next situation where you are the manager and you are managing a remote employee and how to motivate and manage that employee. So in terms of presence, regular conversations. Make sure that weeks don't go by where you are not talking and interacting with someone. Whatever your form of regular conversations are, whether it's on an instant message chat window, whether it's a video chat once a week, if you want to keep a remote employee motivated, make it a regular thing, not an ad hoc thing, because people come to count on the heartbeat, the regularity of that communication as something that gives them confidence. And so the regularity is as important, if not more important, than the content. Moving on to people, again, we're on this theme of humanity. One of the magic questions I have, whether the person is remote or not, when somebody works for me, I ask them, as your manager, I'm going to worry about you. I'm going to worry about what's important to you. So tell me, what should I worry about? Don't do unto others as you would have them do unto you, but figure out what's important to them. And particularly with remote employees, it's so important to ask this question and understand what they're concerned about, what's important to them, and do your best to make those connections and motivate them by understanding that. Make sure that you are giving them career development opportunities. Make sure that they feel like even though they're remote, they're being seen, they're being recognized, and there will be opportunities for them. And then this motivation versus control idea. One of the most important skills for any manager to motivate people to want to do the work instead of just telling them what to do is to give them a reason to personally care about the work. And that requires you as the manager to really think through why this job matters, how it fits into the greater picture, and making that person understand that. If you can't talk about why this work is important to the greater strategy in the bigger picture, you need to question whether that work should exist. But if you can explain it, make sure the remote employee knows that in their bones, where and how their work fits. That is a highly, highly motivating thing. Communicating with a remote employee. Get feedback, just like we had the question about, am I too present, right? Ask the other way to the remote employee, where do you feel in the loop and where do you feel out of the loop? And then make adjustments to make sure that the right things are happening and they are staying in the loop on things they need to know. And then make sure they get a regular update of some kind. We talked about a regular presence, a regular one-on-one present with the team kind of thing that's regular, but also make sure that you are sending to remote employees a regular update of some kind of communications. I will tell you that when I got my first executive job, I did something called Patty's Friday Update. And it took me 10 minutes, and it was basically, here's what happened this week. Here's what I know. Here's what I saw. Here's what's been decided. Here's what happened at some customers. Here's what happened with the product. And it was not formal or overproduced. It was just sharing what was on my mind with everybody in my organization. That update was so well received, and people came to depend on that update for their confidence and motivation so much that I literally did Patty's Friday update for 17 years. It became one of the most important tools in my toolkit as a leader. And again, if your team is dispersed, your employees are dispersed, make sure that you are doing some kind of update on a regular basis. In terms of performance, I can't stress enough how important clear performance measures are with a remote employee. If you are concerned about performance, it should never be, gee, you don't seem to be performing up to the level that I was hoping for. It should be very clear. We agreed on these measures, these dates, these specific things. This is how we described the quality. This is the review cycle we agreed to. Super clear. And then that way, if there's a gap in performance, it's never an emotional conversation or judging something vague. There is a very clear gap, and you can say, here's what we agreed, here's the gap, let's talk about it. And make sure you're having this kind of conversation regularly. I've given you a performance conversation template that I think works really, really well. And your goal, whether you are the manager or the employee, should be no surprises. No one should ever have any surprises about performance because you took the time to be really clear up front. And so I'm not going to go through this whole thing here, but talking about key accomplishments. What is the employee most proud of? What does the manager most appreciate? Make that connection. Outcomes and expectations. What are the top 3 outcomes and measures for the next year? What is changed in your job? What is the career trajectory? If you get employee input on all these questions and then you do your manager input and you get together and you have a conversation, preferably a video call, you are going to be creating a set of performance expectations where there will be no surprises. And that is absolutely critical. So again, here, I'd like to pause and see if there are comments and questions. And by the way, all the tools I'm talking about also work really well for improving your management skills with people who are on site. This is not just useful for remote employees. It's useful for everyone, but it's even more critical with remote employees. So any thoughts about motivating individual remote employees to perform at their best, or how you have done performance measures and performance managers, or any questions about this?
Yeah, Patty, 2 quick ones here. Michael, in terms of the regular, that really sounds to him like it has to be a cultural decision of your team on how you're going to do that regular feedback. Obviously, the once a year, that model is very outdated, but you're going to have to play a little bit to figure out and define that regular. Is that a fair assumption from Michael?
So in every organization, there is a performance management process. It has timing associated with it, and it may have forms and structure associated with it, or it may be very ad hoc. What I have always done and what I recommend is that whatever you need to do to check the boxes culturally with whatever system is in place, do that, but then step back and think about you and your team and what is the most relevant and useful way to do this with you and your team. Bring that human element in. What is it culturally that you and your team need? And you invent that together and overlay that on whatever corporate policy is there. I've very seldom seen that the corporate structure for doing performance is useful enough to accommodate every situation.
One more question here, and I think it's apropos to your background in high tech. Troy has a team of app developers. He says they're not present and not a very chatty bunch. He likes the idea of the presence. Or is there a top tip or two that he can use as the manager to try and help them practice showing more presence, being more present with the team?
You know, that is a perfect segue into the next section, which is about managing a dispersed team. So let me move on now from the conversations with a manager and a remote individual and give you and Troy some ideas about being a manager of a remote team. And I'll keep the app developer introvert not naturally exerting presence in mind as I go through this. So again, managing a dispersed team, presence. This is a mistake I made, and it is don't forget team building. I used to think that if I did not have my team in a room together or at an offsite together, that team building was off the table. The only way you can do team building is if you are in the same place physically. And I have come to learn that this is totally the wrong idea, that you absolutely still can do team building and should do team building, even if you do it via a conference call, or better yet, something like a Google Hangout or a Skype that accommodates multiple parties. And I've put an example here of a team building template. And so everyone on the team could fill out a template like this. A picture of themselves, a short description of the role on the team, deliverables, important outcomes, and then I've given an example of a list of things: favorite books, movies, travel, hobbies, least favorite food, favorite music, most embarrassing song in my music library. This template, I'm just giving you an example here. The best way to do this would be to crowdsource it with your team. So let your app developers come up with a fun set of questions and things to put photos of, and then just go around the virtual room. Schedule a meeting just to do this and have people talk about themselves and their hobbies and things they think they're fun and interesting, and give people a chance to learn about each other. You absolutely can do team building even when you're not together. And that is something I would highly recommend for a team that's not exerting their presence naturally. Also, make sure you have a daily process for thinking of all of your sites and of your remote sites. I know I was managing sales and marketing for a global organization at Hewlett-Packard, and every single day someone at headquarters where I worked would come to me with a plan for doing something, and I would say to them, what did the people in Europe and Asia say about this? And every day they'd say, well, I haven't asked them. And I'd say, well, go ask them and come back to me after you've asked them. Right? So as a manager, give yourself triggers and insist, if you have people working with you directly and people working remotely, that there are always triggers for treating those remote people as much as a part of the team as the team that you can see. And never just make decisions without considering the input of the people working remotely just because they're not there. On the people, the humanity side of this, you know, time zone rotation, I think, is critical. If you're making one geography be up in the middle of the night all the time, that's not fair. Sometimes you're the one that should be up in the middle of the night. You're the one that should be taking the inconvenient time slot. It can also be really useful to set ground rules for meeting times across sites, because a lot of times sites get into this sort of arms war with meeting times, and just work together and set policies for for you're not allowed to schedule meetings at 4 o'clock in the morning for this site. Just think about it ahead of time and set some rules. And don't forget opportunities for recognition and celebration. You know, when you might be tempted to have a launch party or a project completion party inside the company, and you can't do that anymore because your team is spread everywhere, schedule a celebration, send some trinkets, have the local sites bring some food and beverages in, and find a way to have that celebration even if you're not all together. Celebrating and recognition is so important, and it's so easy to forget to do it when people are not in the same building as you are. Communicating. One of the things I think is really important with team time is to use it as team time. I talked about this at the very beginning about what should your work policy be. Think about what you want your team to accomplish, and then make sure you use team time to talk about important issues, not just status. Having status updates during team time is a waste of team time. There are so many better things you could be talking about. And I've given you a list here of actually 2 pages of things that you could talk about instead of status. Let's talk about what we're all on the hook for. What are the risks we face? What data do we wish we knew? Here's one of my favorites. As a team, what stupid stuff are we doing? What should we stop? What's changed in our business? What improvements can we make? What has become harder or easier? And then again, back to this recognition. Who should we thank? Who are the stars? You can do so many more impactful things with team time than just talking about status. Get your status done offline, and then talk about things where you really need to collaborate. Create regular communication mechanisms. I talked about Patty's Friday update. Very, very important. These next 2 points I learned from a colleague of mine who has been managing a global team of engineers for years. And she did what I thought was such a brilliant thing, and it was to augment spoken meetings with blogs and instant messaging. And so the way this would play out is that when she would have a global meeting and people would be talking about projects and things they were going to work on, and there would be decisions that were made, questions that were answered, or open questions that still needed answers, as the conversation was happening, as the conference call was happening, one person at every meeting was responsible for typing all of the key points into an instant message window. And this was reinforcing what was communicated or decided, but more importantly, for the people for whom English wasn't a first language, the instant messaging was a fantastic reinforcement of what was being said. And then after the meeting, that instant message conversation would simply be copied and pasted onto an internal blog. So anyone who missed that meeting could just search the internal blog for the date of the meeting, and they could see a record of all of the ideas and decisions and choices that were made in that meeting. And the beautiful thing about this was it's not extra work. You're already doing it as a part of making the meeting better. I am a big fan of augmenting your communications with instant messaging and blogs. And then finally, in terms of increasing performance, managing a dispersed team, number one, improve meeting behaviors. The dreaded conference call where people are chronically late and people are not listening, they're multitasking, they're doing email. You really got to get in front of this and on top of this. And so what I would do for meetings with my dispersed teams is I would just set a culture that we are starting on time. It is unacceptable to be late for these meetings. And I would start every meeting by first starting on time and then having everyone exert their presence. And I would go around the virtual room and have everybody say where they are, what time zone they're in, and what the weather's like. Just a simple, every single person was heard from, every single person exerted their presence. And then I would say, let's respect each other's time. Our time is valuable. Our time as a team together is really valuable. So here's what we're going to do. No one is going to do email. No one is going to mute their phone. If you're working at home and I hear your dogs or your children, that is fine. We are going to stay very present with each other. And as a gift, instead of a 1-hour meeting, we're going to have a 45-minute meeting, so you'll get that time back to do whatever you were tempted to multitask on. Let's respect each other's time. And I tell you, simply saying that makes a big difference. Of course, you can't police it, but by exerting your presence as the leader and by getting everybody to think about valuing each other's time, and by getting everybody to exert their presence at the beginning of the meeting, you have a much better meeting. And then make sure with your dispersed team that you are revisiting the strategy and the expectations of the team and the leader regularly, and reviewing goals and performance measures and timelines. You have to be really clear about performance measures and timelines with individuals and as a whole team. And if you have slips, you have to address it. Really keep up that communication and really keep up that clarity. So here's the next thought. What are the techniques that you find most useful to give your virtual team more of the benefits of being a team?
As we think about that, Patty, I've got Michael on the line. 100% virtual team, suffering a little bit because they meet on everything. And it's like now these virtual meetings have taken over. They're not as productive doing their own work. Is there a way he as an employee can kind of reach back to management and say, look, we're meeting too much. This has to cut down. We can't get things done.
Yeah, I think have a proposal. Right? And this is just generally good advice, right? If you are the employee and there is a process that your team does that's stupid, that doesn't make sense, that doesn't work, that's unproductive, don't sit back and wait for your manager to fix it. You take the initiative. And it's important to not just go hand your manager the problem. Right? Go to your manager and say, I've identified this as an issue, and here are my recommendations. So we have now these 19 meetings every week, and I see that that is creating a drag on our productivity because we don't have enough time to do the work. But I think absolutely these 4 meetings are critical, and we should emphasize those 4 meetings. And then these other meetings, these other 15 meetings, I think we need to have the owner of those meetings reassess who needs to be there. And these other 5, I think we need to stop and change that to a written regular update, because frankly, we're just discussing status and we don't need to do that. So go to your manager, raise the concern, have a proposal, and offer to help do the work to make it happen. Absolutely, you can have an impact as the employee in that situation.
Hey, Michael, thanks for raising that for us. Lots of questions here about those other questions, right? So, folks, we will make sure, one, we've got a recording of today's event, so we'll be able to come back and review all that. But, Patty, we'll look to either share the slides, we can PDF those and get those to folks, we can get a list, those instead of status report ideas to talk about. So, definitely, folks, we'll get that into your hands after the event. A reminder email will be coming out to all of you. Patty, let's do this. Let's take about 5 more minutes. We've got one more section that you want to address, so let's have you do that. We'll look then to wrap up any questions we have and some final kind of calls to action and lead leading us forward type idea when we wrap up.
Okay, perfect. I will mention, though, to address that question, those ideas of what to do instead of status, you can find on your own in two places. If you search my blog, Azzarello blog, Stop Having Status Meetings, I've blogged about this, and there's also a chapter in my new book, Move, where that is also called Stop Having Status Meetings, and there's a lot of great information there. It's something I really believe in. Okay, finally, I'll just go through very quickly this idea of managing an intact outsourced team. And presence, nothing like going there. Like, go visit that team, spend weekends there, do the human thing. You know, spend weekends, get invited to people's homes, let them give you a tour of their locality. Always join in for kickoffs and celebrations. The more that you can exert your presence with that remote team, the better. In terms of people, one of the things that I found useful is to find one or two advocates that can really help you in your connections with people, and have them be your, eyes and ears, your feet on the ground in that remote site, and always be feeding you information about what you can do to make the people there feel more recognized and motivated. And then communicating, always, regular communications, again, we've talked about, but always finding ways to help them understand where they fit in the bigger organization and strategy, and not making them feel like an offshore outsourced team, but making them feel like a vital part of the team through regular, meaningful communications. And then finally, on performance, it's really, again, clarity, 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 negotiate performance measures, and be really rigorous on performance management. A lot of times with remote outsourced teams, I see managers have the experience where they're not getting the output or the result they want, but the team is saying, look, we did everything you asked. And the issue is more one of level of excellence or quality. And so one of the things that I think is really important here, or a really good idea, is to create a pass-fail. Like, yeah, even if you did 95% of what I asked, the fact that you missed this 5% is not a pass. It's a fail. And so sometimes it can be culturally hard to create clarity around expectations and performance measures. So if you're having that trouble, being really clear about a pass-fail can be a big help. So here's another worksheet that you will have in when you get this packet of slides to help you think through how you can communicate and create presence with your outsourced team in terms of scheduling video chats, processes to collect feedback, schedules for milestones, making sure you're in their schedule for celebrations, and lots of ideas on this worksheet which you can have as a resource. So I'll wrap up here. Finally, in the last section here, any thoughts on ideas and performance management of outsourced teams that you have worked with?
I've got a question. I think let's do this. Let's take the kind of these takeaways. Let's go through that here. I've got two questions that are kind of tied to all the different groups that we've talked to today, Patty. So let's do that, and again, and then we'll wrap up when folks give you a little final call to action.
Okay, perfect. So just a few things to take away. Number one, whether you're the employee or the manager, use these techniques and always be thinking about exerting more personal presence and bringing that humanity in. Number two, don't forget that you can still do team building if the team is not in the same room. Number three, just think about investing more time, effort, creativity, and communicating. Communicating is so important, and think about that as an investment. And then number four, I'll say it again, a broken record, clarity on measures and accountability is even more important. And my final thought is lack of physical presence should increase your effort on connecting and being visible, not decrease it. doesn't let you off the hook because you can't see the people. It's a bigger challenge.
Good stuff, Patty. Two main kind of buckets of questions I've put together here. And folks, I did put out in the chat tab the AzzarelloGroup.com so you can stay in touch with Patty and team, and also Move and Rise. You see there, those books are available to all of you. Let's go with James. James is out there, and the idea of communications going to global teams, and there are teams that don't have English as their first native language, right, second language. What about opportunities to maybe transcribe meetings into the local language? Is that a helpful way? Is that showing care for the team, et cetera, so that nothing is lost in translation, as it were?
Yeah, I mean, if you have the appetite and the capacity to do that, I love that idea, and maybe it doesn't need to be for every communication, but like the rollout of a new strategy, to do that not just in English, but to be sensitive to your remote sites and put that in their languages. I think that would be a spectacular idea. And then, you know, one of the other things that would be really cool about that is you can get translations done, you know, in a mode that's not that expensive, but then find somebody in that remote site to sponsor the effort, review it, and have a conversation with you about it, about how good is this translation, and let's make sure it's great, and help you fix it up if possible. And the act of doing that, of asking for local help with the translation, will make that person feel very engaged, and that person will become an advocate for rolling out the strategy in the site locally. So I really like that idea.
Yeah, and I'll just reiterate on the, I do transcriptions all the time for teams to do these podcasts, webcasts, stuff like that. Services out there, you know, $1 a minute for audio, 30-minute conversation meeting, you know, $30. And then, yes, getting someone local to make sure it's the correct stuff. Love the idea on that, Patty. So good stuff. Final thing here, and I was looking at your final thought, right? The lack of physical presence should increase your effort on connecting and being visible, not decrease it. What say you about then also going that extra mile to put in some physical presence? If you're a manager, making the opportunity, maybe you're based out of Chicago, you've got a bunch of remote employees in the Silicon Valley, that you make the effort to come out and get some FaceTime with them from time to time, or do some of those other physical things. Your thoughts there?
Yeah, absolutely. The physical presence is the most potent, right? So anything you can do to add that to the mix is really valuable. And I tell you, I have done this myself, and I have advised clients to do this, where if your company is saying no travel budget is zero, you're not allowed to do this, I have spent my own money for the airplane ticket, and I'll tell the corporate that to be in that neck of the woods for personal reasons, and then find a place to stay, find a friend, find an employee that will host you, find someone and go there. Because augmenting everything we talked about with initial or periodic physical presence is a big win for everybody.
There's a team I've been working with for about 8 or 9 years. I'll be in Boston later this year. They're about an hour drive away, and I've been contemplating maybe I should kind of take it on my own dime, rent a car, go on up there and just kind of hang out, visit some people. You've convinced me that that's exactly what I will do, so I'm going to add that to my trip, because I thought it would just be a great thing to do since I'll be there.
Absolutely.
And make that effort. So that nailed it for me. Kelly with an I out there saying, hey, really helpful event. Agree with so many of Patty's points. Thank you very much. Other kind comments in here. So folks, what I'm going to do is wrap those up in a little report. We'll share some of the comments and ideas with Patty. There may be some questions mixed in there as well, Patty. So we'll wrap that up. And then, folks, as Patty had mentioned, we are going to work to get the slides in your hands, some useful templates for you to download and utilize that were included in the PowerPoint deck here. So we'll get that into your hands. And again, out in the chat tab, the AzzarelloGroup.com. That's how you can stay in touch with Patty and team. Patty, thank you very much for taking time to present with us. Enjoy everything that you got going on there in Florence, Italy. Appreciate you working remotely with me and with this entire entire team. Thank you again to the Citrix ShareFile team for sponsoring this event, working with Patty to get her on board and share with all of us. Really do appreciate it. Folks, look for the reminder email. It'll bring you back to the on-demand version. Share that reminder email with your colleagues that could benefit from tuning in and hearing what Patty had to say. On behalf of everyone, I want to thank you for taking time today. My name's James Hilliard, and we do look forward to talking to you all down the road.
All right. Thanks, James. Thanks, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here.